For nearly 20 years, I felt sorry for the man who cleaned our school. Every winter, I watched him shuffle down that hallway, in a coat mended with fishing line, pushing the same worn broom. And I thought to myself, there goes the poorest man I know. I was wrong. I was so wrong. It still steals my breath. Because the morning they read his will, I learned the janitor I had pitied died with $2 million. And here is the part that undid me. It was not the money. It was that no one, not one of us, ever knew. He drove the same truck for 23 years. He ate the same brown bag lunch at the same table. And all that time, he was carrying a secret that would shame every assumption I had ever made about a quiet life. Let me be honest before we go on. This is not a video about getting rich on a small paycheck. It is the story of a man the whole town misread. A will that stopped a room cold, and a single line in an old ledger that brought me to my knees. Stay with me. Because where his money went will change how you see your own. His name was Walter. For 38 years, he was the custodian at our elementary school. First one in, last one out. Keys jingling in the dark. He lived alone in a small house, at the edge of town, the kind of place you drive past, without ever really seeing. No vacations anyone knew of. No new clothes. Just work and quiet and that broom. We had a story about Walter, all of us. The story was that he was broke. That life had somehow been hard to him. Teachers lowered their voices when he passed. Parents told their kids to be kind to poor Mr. Walter. And God forgive me, I believed that story more than anyone. I thought his silence was sadness. I thought his thrift was need. One December, I decided to do something about it. I put together a little charity box. Canned goods, a grocery cart, a warm pair of gloves. And I left it by his cart, with a note that said, from a friend. He never mentioned it. But the next morning, the box was sitting on my desk, untouched, with 2 words added beneath mine. Give it forward. I felt embarrassed. I did not yet understand why. Walter never complained, and he never explained. When the boiler broke, he was under it at 5 in the morning. When a child got sick in the hall, he was there with a bucket and a kind word, before the rest of us even moved. He knew every kid by name. He would slip an extra sandwich to the ones who came to school hungry, quietly, like it was nothing. We thought he was simple. We had no idea. And then, one gray morning that spring, Walter did not come in. He had passed in his sleep, 81 years old, in the same small house he had lived in most of his life. We grieved him the way you grieve a fixture, softly, and then we moved on. A week later, a lawyer called the school and asked a few of us to come in. We thought it was a formality. It was not. A handful of us crowded into a small office. The principal, 2 teachers, and me. We assumed it was paperwork. Maybe Walter had a few belongings to pass along. The lawyer, an older man, took off his glasses and looked at us for a long moment. "Before I begin," he said, "I need you to understand that Walter was not who you thought he was." Then he read the number out loud. $2 million. The room went completely still. Someone actually laughed. The nervous kind of laugh. The kind that escapes when a thing simply makes no sense. $2 million. From a man who mended his coat with fishing line. From a man I had once tried to hand a box of canned soup. The lawyer explained it plainly, almost gently. There was no lottery ticket. No inheritance from some rich relative. No secret second life. For decades, every single payday, Walter had quietly set a little aside and bought small pieces of steady, ordinary companies. And then he simply never sold. He reinvested, he waited, and he let time do the slow, patient work. Little by little, for a lifetime. But the money was only half of it, because the will kept going. He had left the bulk of it to the school library and to the children's hospital, 2 towns over. And then the lawyer opened a worn ledger. Walter's own handwriting, line after line, and began to read, where the rest had already gone, quietly, for years, while he was still alive. A family's heating bill. One hard winter. A teacher's rent. The year she nearly quit. Dozens of kids' lunch debts. Erased. No name attached. And then the lawyer read one more line, and my heart stopped. A child's surgery. Paid in full. 3 years back. I knew that surgery. It was my grandson's. The anonymous donor we had wept over and never found. It was Walter. It had always been Walter. I had to leave the room. I stood in that hallway. He had swept for 38 years, and I cried like a child. All that time, I thought I was the one being kind to him. There is a line in the Bible I had read 100 times, and never once felt until that moment. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give in secret. And I finally understood the thing that had confused me for 20 years. Walter did not deny himself because he was afraid of money or because he loved it too much to spend. He simply kept his treasure somewhere the rest of us could not see. Where your treasure is, Jesus said, there your heart will be also. Walter's heart had been in that library, that hospital, those hungry kids. The whole time. There is a name in Scripture for a man who lives like that. Not lucky. Not even clever. Faithful. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. That was Walter's whole life. A few things. A small paycheck. A steady hand. A quiet obedience. No one ever applauded. And in the end, it had grown into something none of us could believe. I drove home different that day. I kept thinking about my own life. How loud I could be. About the little good I did. How badly I wanted to be seen doing it. Walter had spent a lifetime doing the exact opposite. He gathered quietly. He gave quietly. And he trusted that the one who sees in secret was the only audience that ever mattered. Now, I want to be careful here, because this matters. This is not a promise that if you pinch your pennies, you will die with millions. That was never the point, and it was never Walter's point either. But there is an old proverb that says, "Wealth from schemes and shortcuts fades away, while whatever is gathered little by honest labor, will grow." Walter simply believed that verse enough to live it faithfully for a lifetime. He left an inheritance too, but not the kind that spoils. A good man, the book says, leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Walter had no children of his own, so he quietly made the whole town his family. Every kid who checks out a book in that library, every child who heals in that hospital, they are Walter's inheritance now. He stored his treasure where no moth, no rust, and no market crash could ever reach it. So I started small. After that, one Christmas, I paid off a stranger's layaway and told absolutely no one. I stopped announcing my own good deeds. And every payday, I began setting a little aside. Not to chase a fortune, but because Walter had finally shown me what quiet, faithful stewardship looks like when you let it run for a lifetime instead of a weekend. And that coat? The one mended with fishing line, the one I had pitied him for. I see it completely differently now. It was never the coat of a poor man. It was the uniform of a free one. Walter never needed things to tell him that he mattered. He already knew whose he was, and he already knew exactly where he was going. It never made Walter famous. He would have hated that. But it made him free. Free from the need to impress anyone, free from the fear of never having enough, and free to give until it was almost all gone. That is a kind of wealth no paycheck can measure, and no downturn, and no thief can ever take from you. I think about Walter almost every day now, in that quiet hallway. He never had much. The world bothers to count. A small house, an old truck, a broom worn smooth by his own two hands. But he was the richest man I have ever known, because he understood a secret that most of us miss our whole lives. It was never, ever about how much he kept. So, how does a janitor die with $2 million and no one ever know? He had understood something that turns our whole scoreboard upside down. The size of your fortune was never the measure of your life. Where your treasure quietly goes and who it faithfully serves, that is the measure. And Walter had spent every ordinary day storing his up in the only place a market or a thief or the years could never reach. So let me ask you the question. Walter never spoke out loud, but answered with his whole life. If someone read the ledger of your quiet days tomorrow, the gifts no one saw, the treasure no one ever counted, what would it say? Your heart was truly set upon. Because in the end, that answer is the only wealth you actually get to keep. If Walter's story reached you, do one quiet thing this week. Give something. Your time, your money, a hidden kindness. And tell absolutely no one. Let it be a secret between you and the God who sees in secret. And if you'd like more stories where biblical wisdom meets your wallet, subscribe and walk this slow, steady road with us. Quiet, wise, God-honoring wealth. Because the next story might be the most hopeful one yet. A husband and wife, one modest income between them, who somehow paid off every debt they had and retired without owing a single soul a dollar. How they did it? Quietly, together, is a story worth staying for.